Hey guys, I'm Tim.
I'm VoiderX.
Hey everyone, I'm Rowan.
What's up, guys? I'm Godcubing. Welcome to the Methodical Cubing podcast.
In this episode, Tim and Godcubing interview Yash Mehta, the inventor of the Mehta method and Yruru style CP. We will cover topics such as Mehta, Yruru, and his thoughts on different aspects of cubing.
Mehta has always unapologetically promoted the use of algorithms to reduce solving time. What do you think is the maximum number of algorithms that a speed solving method should require the user to learn?
Right. So again, I think it's dependent on the kinds of algorithms and the context in which the algorithms are used. For example, if you look at three style, it's close to 1,000 algorithms, over 900 if you include the flipping and the twisting algs. But all of those algs are reasonably intuitive once you understand the basic theory behind it, and they are very easy to memorize by your fingers because they're just doing something and then undoing the same thing in just a different order. So your fingers are basically in the perfect position to execute the second half of the algorithm most of the times. For those reasons, it's much more easy to learn these 1,000 algs compared to, say, the 500 algs of ZBLL. And we've seen people learn the 500 ZBLL algs after years of practice at least, and they're pretty good at it. So I believe that a hard cutoff for most people would be somewhere around the 1,000 algs mark later in the future. But obviously, like if we look specifically at Mehta in this context, the TDR variation of Mehta, 500 of the 900 algs that we require are ZBLLs, and the other 400 are fairly easy 2-gen or 3-gen pseudo slotting algs. And they're again very easy to understand and very easy on your fingers to execute. So for those reasons, I believe that these 900 algs feel like these 400 algs at least feel much less than 400. And they're also reasonably easy to recognize. On the other hand, if somebody would want to learn an entire one-low class layer that's around 4,000 algs, and all of those algs would be exponentially more difficult to recognize simply because of the number of cases that look similar to each other. I think very few people would ever be able to successfully manage to learn the entire one-low class layer set, and I'm not really sure if it would help a lot in solving faster because of the massive constraints in recognition and recall. So yeah, I'd guess around 1,000 for top solvers.
Okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that 1,000 is a pretty good estimate for top solvers, and then if it's
Yeah, I mean, as an
intuitive,
upper limit, yes.
it's also easier to learn those algorithms. And
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have learned full floating, which is, I don't know, around 3,000 algorithms, and they seem to be using it. Also, the usage of full floating is not exactly rigid, as in, there are a lot of places where you could use normal three style or full floating. And so for that reason, it's not a rigid usage of full floating. And yet, people seem to be using it to get better times, even though they're 3,000 algorithms. So, yeah, in case of intuitive, this bound does not really hold.
and if I'm understanding you correctly, you're also saying that if it's harder to finger trick, that that also is more taxing on how hard it is to learn or how many you can learn.
Yeah, I guess so. I feel so too. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. I haven't heard that before, but that's an interesting point. Okay, now we're on to the more Mehta focused questions. This one's
Can
pretty
I
broad. What inspired you to originally develop Mehta?
Right. So, I believe this was somewhere in August of 2020, and I was looking at stats of the way the amount of time people take in different steps of CFOP, and I saw this very prominent thing. I thought that people at the lower levels, like somewhere around 15 second solving, would have a much higher TPS in last layer, simply because it's moves that we have already, pre-decided what we're going to do. And for F12, we need to be constantly looking ahead to what the next step is. And so it'll slow us down. But at the higher level, as look ahead improves, people would be much faster at F12, and the F12 speeds would be reasonably close to or even faster than your last layer speed, simply because the recognition time in last layer is basically a big pause, whereas you don't have any pauses in good solves, at least in in the first half of the CFOP solve. But I was shocked to see that, at least in case of Timon and Felix and other fast solvers, the last layer TPS was still about 2 or 3 higher than their F12 TPS. And this was including the amount of time that they spent to recognize the case, for example, the OLL or the PLL case. Of course, they look ahead to that case while doing the previous algorithms, but I mean, you still cannot completely remove the OLL to PLL transition pause, right? At least not this time. So that made me feel as if we had if we had a method that was more algorithmic based, we'd be able to exploit the fact that we are just better at using algorithms in the middle of a solve, as long as the recognition times are and the recall times are not unnecessarily high. So I tried to figure out a way of ending a solve with 3 algorithms instead of 2, and I tried to do it in a way that we have sort of a system where we can choose multiple paths, so that we can select which sort of path would be a better choice to make. Uh, yeah, that is what basically gave birth to Meta. The way I exactly did it is available on the website if you're interested in depth.
The Maheta community has developed the method organically over time. What were some of the
Mhm.
earliest incarnations of Meta before it became popular? Like when you were
So
still developing?
yeah,
Yeah.
right when I was coming up with the idea, I actually thought that orienting corners, then permitting corners, and then solving the edges would be a better approach, simply because we're more used to things like OL and PLL. So yeah, separating those 2 steps would be a good idea. The thing is, although the algorithms for the corner orientation turned out to be quite good, the algorithms for corner permutation were okay, not that great, because there were a lot of R2s involved, and on top of that, there were R2 UD is a difficult set to finger trick unless you are an avid square one user. So for that reason, we sort of had to abandon this idea. This was like the basic fundamental first idea, solving last 5 edges, which was around 200 each cases, and orienting and permitting corners separately.
But did you do last 5 edges like including EO or without EO?
Yeah, I mean, the last 5 edges, initially we planned to do it including EO, which is why it bumped up the algorithm count to over 200.
Right. Okay. Okay. Uh, the next question. You state that Mehita was developed by working backwards with certain end steps in mind. Originally, you, as you just said, were 6 EO, 6 CP, and last 5 edges. However,
Right.
within 4 days of making the original proposal, last 5 edges was quickly abandoned and never became part of Mehita OS. Why is this?
So initially, I thought that last 5 edges would be a good arc set to bring into the method, simply because all of the pieces that you need to solve are right in front of you. You don't really need to tilt the cube to be able to recognize the case. The thing is, we realized, or at least people convinced me over time, that the recognition is not that big a deal. And last 5 edges, the algorithms are not so much better than solving last 6 edges at the same time. Of course, last 6 edges you cannot algorithmize it because there's just so many cases and the recognition is worse. But in terms of the number of moves required using the top techniques that people use today, last 5 edges and last 6 edges does not have such a significant gap between the two of them that it warrants the use of a method that requires last 5 edges basically.
Okay.
And there were a lot of benefits of shifting the EO step earlier on in the solve, as was pointed out, and that did not really affect the move count as much, and that drastically helped the recognition. So we just decided to switch to L5EP instead of L5E.
Cool. When you originally proposed the method, how did you think it would hold up against other methods?
I wasn't very sure, honestly. I mean, I was confident that it would be a good idea, but at least at the time that at least my initial proposal, even while I was talking about it, I was almost certain that the way it was at that time before the development, I was sure that it would not hold up against the current top methods, simply because they had been in development for decades. But then again, I was reasonably confident that the amount of room that we had to develop Mehta over the months and years, coming years, I was almost certain that we could at least catch up to the top methods of the day in terms of recognition, move count, ergonomics, and uh, uh, other metrics by which methods are measured.
Many of the Mehta OS steps are named after different individuals. For instance, Trang's DR
Mm-hmm.
block, Andrea's permutation of DR block, John Tamana's last edge. I think most listeners know Vincent Trang. Who are Andreas and John Tamanas?
Right. So, Andras Olvera, I believe I'm pronouncing it correctly, was one of the earliest developers of the method. I'm not really sure if he's well known in the community for anything else, but he had put in a lot of effort in helping develop a lot of algorithm sets and sort of popularizing the method among a lot of people, which helped us grow the community quite quickly. John Tamannas, I'm not really sure who he is, but the step JTLE, John Tamannas Last Edge, was a step that was already invented somewhere in 2005, and it was just a step that we sort of happened to require uh, within the method. So we just did not want to name a new step. We just used the name that was originally proposed by him.
What is JTLE again? I forgot.
Right. JTLE is once you have edges of the top layer oriented. So it's basically like OCLL, like Son or Pi or H or the other OLLs, along with your DR edge oriented correctly, but not in the right spot, somewhere in the unit, basically.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. So it solves the DR edge while orienting all the top layer corners.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, reducing it to PLO,
Uh,
right. I think I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. How many people were were involved in the early development of Manhattan?
So I don't think I'll be able to name everybody because there were just, I mean, around 10 or more people who were helping us doing all of the logistical work. Because it's difficult to appreciate the fact that when you're developing a method, it's not just coming up with ideas. It's also testing a lot of them via simulations or doing hundreds of solves. Once you come up with multiple ideas, you have to generate the algorithms for every single one of them, and not just any algorithms that the computer spits out. You need to figure out what the best algorithms are. Some people might even have to learn some of the algorithms to be able to genuinely understand how viable certain steps are in terms of memorizing the algorithms and actually using them within SpeedSolve. So we actually required quite a few people, and it still took a lot of months to do a lot of the concrete work. I off the top of my head, I can remember Vincent Trang. There was Ethan Davis. There was Andreas. There was um, Matthew Hinton. There was Liam Haidushek, if that's how you pronounce the name. And there were a couple more people that I'm sure I'm missing.
Okay, cool. I think you already touched upon this, but originally it appeared that 6CO, 6CP was going to be kind of the path of choice for people who didn't want to learn a ton of algorithms, relatively speaking. Somewhere, along the way, decal CDRLL became the main path and became what was recommended. What was the cause for this shift? And yeah, why the main path changed?
Initially, we did not have a lot of algorithms generated simply because when I proposed 6CP, I was the only person trying to develop the method. So I just went with my gut feeling and generated just the algorithms that the computer spit out, and I did not have much of a metric to measure how good certain algorithms were. So I just tried to get an intuitive feel of how the recognition is going to be, and how many moves the algorithms were on average. So it turned out that the 6E or 6CP path had a lesser move count than the decal CDRL path. But I mean, as it turns out, that the 6CP algorithms required a lot of R2s, and even though the 6CP algorithms can be recognized by two sides, it wasn't exactly very straightforward. The way you do it in PLL is you have six stickers that you look at, and then you can recognize the PLL case. You can do exactly the same thing for 6CP, except you don't have you have exactly six stickers actually. Let me see. Okay, you have 7 stickers. The two U layer stickers on the front face, two U layer stickers on the right face, two D layer stickers on the right face, and the one D layer sticker on the front face. So that's like 7 stickers that you memorize, that you have to recognize. But the thing is, those stickers are far away from each other, and you have to look for patterns that are, not exactly human to just pick up on. So for those reasons, we decided over time that CDRL, the recognition to which is identical to COLL recognition, is much easier. Also, the quadroton metric move count is much less for CDRL, slightly less. I mean, for CDRL than it is for 6CP. And on top of that, the COLL algorithms are heavily optimized already. So we can take a lot of inspiration from those algorithms while coming up with CDRL algorithms. Also, the fact that I thought that CDRL algorithms will not improve a lot on COLL algorithms, but as it turns out, the average move count for the best finger trickable algorithms is almost an entire move less than COLL. So that was a pleasant surprise.
Uh, were you surprised by the popularity that Meta gained very quickly, or do you think that it had much higher potential for popularity and usage?
So I believe that I did work reasonably hard to sort of push the method out to people, because I genuinely believe that the more people that there are that know about the method, and the more people that try to develop the method, the more diverse set of ideas that you can get, and hopefully improve the method. Um, so for that reason, I tried to. I mean, I advertise the method wherever I could find space. For example, on Facebook or on Discord or on speed solving or Reddit, or wherever I could find uh, the ability to do so, I did. I do think that the amount of popularity that Mehta received, it deserved, but I think it was possible to push it further. The thing is, in the duration that I was developing Mehta, I mean, after the first couple of months, uh, my schooling got extremely hectic, and I had to uh, put in a lot of effort in school at that time, because I had my thesis and I had my college applications, and for those reasons, I believe that maybe we could have pushed Mehta a lot further in terms of popularity, at least. It was possible, but I mean, I'm pretty happy with the place where we are at.
All right. Did you personally ever switch to Maheta as your main method? And if you did, which path did you learn algorithms for?
I wouldn't say I switched to it as my main method, but I did try to learn an entire path. I know all of decal, CDRL, and L5BP at this point, and that is the path of my choice. It's easy for me because I already knew COLL, and I mean, if later on in the future, if I find the courage, I'll probably learn an entirety of TDR and ZVLL, just to flaunt the fact that I know the entirety of the method that I proposed. The thing is, I've spent so much time learning CFOP that a lot of skills are not exactly transferable from CFOP to Mehta. So for most top people today, even though they have a potential, they could have a potential to be much faster with Mehta, as per my beliefs. Um, I would still not think that it would be worth it for them to switch to Mehta, simply because it would take years of practice for them to be able to do that. For example, after years and years of training, once you're on your last edge in last pair in F12, even before you solve the last pair, you can sort of know what OLL you're gonna get, and that's not something that you put a lot of deliberate effort in trying to know. It's just after tens of thousands of solves, you just have an intuition for what kind of OLL you're gonna get after you solve your last F12 pair, even before you know actually do it. This exact uh, this exact skill is not exactly transferable to Mehta, because there are different sort of predictions that you have to do in this method, right? So you'll have to go through this entire years and years of practice to be able to get to the same stage with Mehta, or any other method for that matter, if you're the top and switch methods. Yeah, I did not really switch, and I don't think that I'll switch to it as my main method. But that's simply because I have learned C4 for so long. I don't speed cube that seriously at this point.
Okay, yeah. So sunk cost fallacy kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you feel about these very popular speed cubers and very talented ones such as Jaden McNeil, Tao Yu, using meta TDR sometimes as their main method? How did you feel about them joining?
Right. So I was glad because those people's intuition about methods is really phenomenal. The amount of knowledge that those people bring to the table is great, and them sort of acknowledging that the method is great and it could possibly even surpass the best methods that we know currently. That was a huge relief in a way, and it was a proud moment because I mean I personally did feel that in the past, but the thing is, I'm just one person, and the community of cubers that are trying to develop the method is a very small fraction of the entire speed cubing community. So when people who weren't involved in developing the method came across it and tried it for a couple of days or weeks, and sort of came to the conclusion that this could actually be something great in the future, it sort of felt great that these great people who don't use Meta as their main method currently still think that it has the potential of taking off in the future. So yeah, it was great to it was a great pat on the back basically.
Um, which variants do you think a new meta user should learn?
I think we're fairly clear on this at this point that the CDRLL path is almost definitely the best first path to learn. Most people will come from CFOP, so they'll be drawn to the APDR path quite a bit. But the thing is, I mean, no doubt it has the potential to be a great path, but I do think that the CDRL path is almost definitely the best thing to learn first, simply because first it has great move count and great recognition. Secondly, it has a very simple pathway to learn TDR if you want to do that later on in the future. And I think recognition of decal is much easier than the recognition of 6CO. As in, you can learn the entirety of decal and learn just a couple of 6CO cases that are easy to spot and solve. 6CO happens to be sort of an alg set wherein the more corners you have oriented correctly, the better the algorithms are. And the more corners you have oriented correctly, the easier it is to spot that it is an easy case, right? So for that reason, I think having decal slash CDRLL as your main path and learning JTLE and APDR on the side would be the best thing that new user could do. New user could do.
Great. So with the creation and the separation of PLLCS steps, an attempt has been made to make the 6CO path viable once again. How do you feel about this new path in comparison with 6CP or APDR?
The PLCS path sort of is an option select between APDR and anti-APDR in a way. As in anti-APDR is when you solve the DR block, but with the DFR and DBR corners swapped, but oriented correctly. I think it's a great idea. A lot of developers actually think that it is almost as good as the CDRL path, if not better. I'm not really sure about making that strong of a statement, simply because I don't know. I just have sort of a bias towards the CDL path. But yeah, I mean, I think it does make 6CO viable again. If a person wants to learn 6CO and not decal, PLCS makes 6CO completely relevant again. And if they want to, push 6CO ahead, it's probably not an impossible task at this point.
What is PLCS? I'd never heard of this until I read this question.
Right. PLCS is when you have PLL on top and the DFR and DBR corners are swapped but oriented correctly. So on the top layer, you'll get a PLL where basically you have a PLL parity sort of situation going on. But the PLL parity comes from the fact that we have an additional swap on the T layer. So that's PLL corner swap.
Oh, okay. Okay. And leading up to that, you would use APDR, and you'd have to wait.
Anti-APDR.
Oh, yeah. And does APDR orient the corners? I'm sorry, I never was super into
No,
meta.
so what you're supposed to do is after you're done with EO ledge, that is solving the 1x2x3 block on the dealer and the E slice, you orient all the edges. So that's your EO ledge. After that, you orient all of the 6 corners that are remaining. That is your 6 CO step. And at this point, all of your edges and corners are oriented, and you do either APDR or anti-APDR. What this does is it solves the 3 remaining DR pieces. APDR solves all of them correctly, and anti-APDR puts in the edge correctly and puts in the remaining 2 corners in a swapped state. And what this leaves you with is a parallel or a parallel parity case, a PLCS case.
All right. So after TDR, Maheta TDR had already gained some popularity, it was discovered that a French person, Lucas Zergi, I hope I'm not saying his name wrong, had already proposed this idea back in 2017. Since this isn't the first time something like this has happened, how do you feel about the rehashing of concepts and ideas in general in the cubing world?
I mean, I believe this is fairly common in speed cubing because there are only so many ideas that that can exist on a 3x3 in terms of solving it as fast as possible. So a lot of people have probably thought of a lot of things in the past as well. I mean, I'm fairly certain that the ZZ method was discovered before Mr. ZZ did it. I'm also fairly certain that I read somewhere that the Roux method was discovered before Yruru discovered, pushed it forward. And yeah, so for these reasons, I believe that I think at least I personally think that getting caught up in who did what and things like that is not really relevant. What's relevant is when people recognize the potential in it and try to push it forward. Like for example, Yruru or Mr. ZZ did with their own methods. They not just came up with the idea, but they also helped develop it much further than anybody in the past had. They helped popularize it much further than anybody in the past had, and in case of Yruru, he even happened to get great results with it. So yeah, in this particular case, I think the context of picking up Mehta as a method is completely different. In my case, I developed the method from the backwards and came to realize that something like a ledge or an EO ledge would be a great middle point to reach. And in the case of the person Lucas Zergi, was it? I believe the way he came up with the idea was he took inspiration from triangular or hexagonal Francisco, one of these methods, and he sort of tried to extrapolate it into sort of a rectangle shape and ended up with reaching the EOLED stage or the ledge stage at some point. So I think the way we approached the entire development process was extremely different, and for this very reason, we saw different amounts of potential and decided to invest different amounts of efforts into developing the method. So I believe that's the context of developing the method is the more important part. That's just what I believe.
Cool. This is a pretty broad question. I'm going to try and make it a little more specific. What do you think is the future of Mehta? As in, do you think that it's more towards TDR or those two-step approaches, or between OSing, between the multiple three-step approaches?
I believe that most of the people, if Mehta does take off at some point, I believe most people that will use Mehta will be using the three-step approaches simply because, I mean, the number of algorithms is much more manageable that way. It's only like 120, 130 algorithms, which is sort of similar to the number of algorithms that you have in CFOP. I think you have like 80 in CFOP, and 120 is, I mean, it is reasonably high, but it's not like a gigantic leap. So I feel like most of the people that will use Mehta will be using three-step methods, three-step variants. But at the top, if Mehta is to be adopted, the two-step Mehta variations would probably outdo the three-step variations. I mean, that's just something that I personally believe. There are people who disagree with me, and I mean, I can see the point of views. I believe even Jaden and Tao both feel that the two-step methods is marginally better than the three-step methods, even though the three-step methods have a lot of option select possibilities. I think it's. I think we just feel it in the gut. We don't have a lot of. I mean, we do have a lot of reason behind it, but I mean, both of the contingents have both sides have reasonably good reasons to believe their own theories.
Why would three-step approaches be better? To me, it's almost intuitive that two steps is better than three, but what are the reasons on that side?
Right. So the thing is, first of all, the move count is approximately the same in the two-step and the three-step variants, simply because the algorithms in the two-step variant are longer. Secondly, the number of skips that you can get in the three-step method is extremely high. In about 3% of the solves, you'll skip at least one of the steps, and in about 0.1% of the solves, you'll skip two of the three steps. So that's great. In contrast, if you look at the two-step variants, the TDR variant, there's only about a 0.1% chance that you'll skip any of the two steps. So, and also the fact that because you have option select, maybe there's a lot more room for improvement compared to in TDR, where you just have to drill a lot of algorithms, and the entirety of improvement comes from just recalling better, recognizing better, and just executing better.
So for beginners or people learning Mehta, do you think that it suffers from bad head in the two alg to alg transitions? So when you go from algorithmic step to algorithmic step, do you think there's, a pause there for new users to recognize case and everything?
So I feel this was quite a problem in 6CO to 6CP transition, simply because the pieces move, the corners move a lot from 6CO to 6CP. In decal to CDRLL or decal to JTLE, I believe this transition is much easier. I mean, it's almost as hard as, for example, the transition that you have in last pair of Roux to CMLL, simply because it's more or less the same thing, right? The last few steps of decal is inserting the last corner edge pair, and we have a similar thing in the last pair of Roux. I mean, if you think that the transition from second block's last pair of Roux to CMLL is difficult, then yes, you could say that.
So, in your opinion, well, actually, no, we already answered this question, but you think that three algorithmic steps is better than two because the higher TPS
No, I believe that
potential.
two algorithmic steps is better. I believe that the two algorithmic steps is better, personally. I'm saying that a lot of other people have claimed that the three algorithmic step is better.
No,
And they sort of...
I was asking more in like reference to other methods such as CFOP or other
Oh,
step
right.
ending.
Yeah, so I mean, all of the meta users and the community believes that the 3 steps instead of 2 is a much better idea. Simply because one of the reasons that I mentioned initially, that algorithms just happen to be faster to execute in terms of moves. So as long as the overall move count is reasonably similar, the greater the portion of the solve that you can that you can use algorithms in, the better. And also the fact that I mean, having 3 algorithmic steps allows you to sort of switch to autopilot very easily compared to say in CFOP, where you have to be much more creative for a longer period of time in the beginning of the solve. And because you're on autopilot for a larger duration of the solve, you can use that extra mental space to, I don't know, recall better or recognize better or look ahead better to coming algorithms.
Okay. Now for a very excellent question that I wrote on the spot because I realized we didn't ask it yet. What makes Mehta OS so good? How would you recommend like creating future OS or methods approaches like to option select? Sort of asking like what makes an option select system good, and how is Mehta an example, though maybe in the rough still, of this?
Mm-hmm. So, if we look at, for example, the other option select system, which is OLL PLL slash CLL ELL, which is one of the things that a lot of people have proposed in the past. The reason this would probably never work is recognizing both OLL and CLL is an extremely intensive task to do. And I mean, if you are planning to use OLL PLL as your main path, it's almost impossible for you to on the fly judge that the CLL case in this particular case is extremely easy. I should switch to the other pathway. In case of Mehta, what happens is if you, for example, pick 6CO as your default path, it's very easy to see whether the decal case is difficult or not, simply because there are only 2 corners that you have to look at, and you can just intuitively judge how the decal case is going to turn out to be, because you can track the 2 corners in the previous step. Similarly, if you have decal as your default path, then the easier cases of 6CO, which have a lot of corners oriented, are extremely easy to spot, because I mean, while you're solving, you can just see that a lot of corners have yellow or white facing up. So this must be an easy 6CO case. So I don't need to waste time recognizing which decal case this is. I'll just recognize which 6CO case this is, and just go ahead while doing that. So what this does is it removes a lot of ambiguity in which particular pathway I should waste in air quotes, waste time recognizing, because you don't have to recognize both in Mehta almost ever, right? Because you can just know which case is going to turn out to be better, which is not the case in OLL/CLL, right? So I think that's an important thing to consider when developing future OS schemes, where it's fairly easy to judge without recognizing the specific case. It's fairly easy to judge which particular case is going to be easy. I think the reason this helps is because the subsets of 6CO have a huge variation in terms of how good the algorithms are. The algorithms where 5 or 6 corners are misoriented are relatively much worse than the algorithms where 2 or 3 corners are misoriented. So if you have this sort of a variation in an alg set, the alg set by itself may not be great, but in combination with another alg set which has a similar property, it will probably do very good.
So if I'm understanding correctly, part of it is that the pieces that you're recognizing are related, like the same almost, because the 2 decal corners are also part of the 6CO corners.
That was not one of the points that I made. I guess that's also a point. I'm not sure how applicable it is. What I meant was the way you recognize a certain case is first you break it into a subset, then you break it into a further subset, and so on. For example, if you're recognizing a ZBLL, first what you'll do is you'll recognize which OCLL it is. Once you recognize which OCLL it is, you'll recognize which COLL case this is, and once you recognize the COLL case, you'll look at the edge permutation and recognize which exact CBLL this is, right? You don't just look at it and know which one it is. I mean, you might at some point, but I mean, I'm just giving a very rough example. So even in 6CO, if you just glance at the cube and you don't exactly have the time to look at which exact corners are misoriented, you can just glance at the cube and know that, in general, a lot of corners are misoriented or very few corners are misoriented. And we have a very strong correlation with the number of corners misoriented and the quality of the algorithm. So if we have this sort of separation that, okay, if a lot of corners are oriented, then the algorithm is going to be very good. And judging the number of corners oriented is a very non-brain intensive task. Then I think it makes it a very good candidate for OS solving.
Okay, so what would be?
So,
Go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
So what you're saying is that it's better because the rule for which to use is simple, and recognition is not really existent. It's it's not recognition. It's just peripheral vision.
The rule to use the rule to pick among the two of the possible cases does not require to recognize both cases. This is basically in a nutshell what I meant.
Okay.
Okay. So I was just going to say, for a lot of those questions of current and former users of the method, there's one other question that's kind of a joke, but I'll ask it anyway. This is from a fan of Mehta. Are you good at math? Is the question.
Right. I mean, I don't think being good at math is necessary for developing algorithms or solving speed solving methods. I just happen to be good at math simply because I'm doing college in astrophysics, and astrophysics just requires you to use a lot of math. I mean, I'm nowhere as good and rigorous at math as math major statisticians or say computer scientists, but there's a fair amount of use of math and astrophysics, but that is where my expertise in math ends. So I don't think I used a lot of it. I mean, maybe I have an intuition that helps me get things done faster, but I don't think that it's a necessary thing for algorithm development.
Yeah, I don't either. And as a computer scientist, I'm not very good at math either. Yeah.
All right, moving on to the Yruru CP questions. The first one is, how did you make this? Like, it just seems like all of the previous CP approaches were very complicated and hard. How did you simplify it down and make it into something that can be done in 15 seconds?
So I think this is one of the places where ignorance is bliss, because I was not aware that other CP methods existed. I mean, I knew that people must have thought of something to do with CP, because I mean it's just a natural question to ask. But I did not know that people had developed complicated but existent systems for CP for CP solving. So what I did was I tried to just break down all of the cases that there were and try to look at the patterns and just pulled up things and figured out what patterns exist, what patterns don't, and on top of that, there's also like the obvious things that if you just do R and U moves, you're obviously going to stay in the same CP state, and if you turn any of the other layers, you're definitely going to go to some other state. And so what I tried to do was I tried to figure out what will be the easiest way for people to in practice recognize what state of CP we are in, right? That does not involve tracking every single corner. It's like, how do you make this process abstract? How do you not have to solve all of the corners to all of the bottom corners to recognize what CP state is? And yeah, I mean, I think it was just a lot of hard work. I mean, I don't remember how long it took me, but it took me a lot of effort to just break down the patterns.
I totally just understand how it works now. What the heck? Yeah, you just explained that. So like the way you created it is you basically inserted those corners and then looked at like from the 4 corner, you just found the 1 corner and the 2 corner should be next, and that would be a solved CP. Versus if it was 2-3
Yeah.
or 2-1, then you would have a certain A perm or an E perm, and then once you know that swap,
Right.
you were able to deduce the others. I don't quite understand that step, but wow.
It was just a lot of pattern recognition, basically.
So extending that into kind of resolution of CP and all of the CP triggers that are used, how did you develop that aspect of Yruru?
Again, it was a lot of trial and error. I mean, of course, there was a little bit of theory that I sort of, understood about quantum permutation while I was recognizing patterns. But a lot of it had to do with trial and error. Like I thought of the different triggers that you could have, for example, FU F prime or F prime UF, or a lot of basically triggers, not F prime UF, but like the triggers that preserve the 2 corners on the bottom left and change the state of CP of the remaining 6 corners. That was the idea. And I mean, I guess the best way of putting it is trial and error. There was very little rhyme and reason. There was just some sort of a structure that I found out and just tried hammering a lot of different ways of solving CP, figured out patterns, and came up with what I came up with.
Okay, I'll ask this next one. Roux, which is widely regarded as the best method for one hand, makes liberal use of M moves, and hence liberal use of table abuse. Yruru notably avoids all slice moves. Why was Yruru designed this way, and how do you feel about the use of slice moves and the use of table abuse in one-hand method?
These are actually 2 very different questions. I mean, I did not develop Yruru with the sole objective of removing M moves. But yeah, I mean, it just so happened because at the end of the day, what I wanted was reducing to a 2-gen case. And if we can reduce to a 2-gen case in NU or in RU. Reducing to MU is basically Roux, and reducing to RU is Yruru. And I feel I to this day feel that RU is probably a little bit better than MU even in one-handed. I mean, I may be extremely wrong when I say that, but I don't know. It just feels much more natural to me to RU. Now my thoughts on table abuse. Of course, it's an extremely controversial topic. But intuitively speaking, when you say that you have to solve the cube using only one hand, I feel like you should not be allowed to use a table. Now, of course, whether this should reflect in the rules of the World Cube Association's one-handed solving rule set is a different concern, and I believe it's not a good idea to change this rule now when there are a lot of Roux users and Roux is booming. And I mean, I really like that method personally. So, I mean, removing table abuse from one-handed solving would sort of be a massive hit to the Roux base, user base, and that's something that I would not like to happen. But from looking at it from a natural standpoint, I mean, if the objective of the method is to solve it using one hand, I don't I don't see how it is natural at all to allow the use of another surface that's not your hand, basically. I don't know. It's just something that I feel intuitively.
Okay. So with 657 cases, do you think that CP solved one look last layer could be widely used in CP methods, like in comparison to using 2GLL, which is with EO done?
I did think of trying to incorporate this sort of a CP solved one look last layer, which would use only fat R, R, and U moves to solve all of the cases. I did not like the method simply because, well, first of all, it has 600 algorithms and extremely not so intuitive algorithms at that. And the recognition is not amazing. I mean, it's not terrible either, but it's not amazing because the edges are both misoriented and misplaced. Um, maybe it could be useful at some point in the future, but so the thing is, I don't think that CP first methods are going to be that popular in the future. Sure, a lot of people are gonna like the Yruru style of recognizing CP, and it's gonna help them if they have an extremely high TPS uh, in solving the cube 100. But I mean, even after the amount of developments that have been made in CP first based methods, I feel that Roux still is a better option for people who don't mind table abuse and who don't necessarily have an extremely high turns per second. The good thing about CP first methods is the fact that you don't have to worry about the rest of the moves, and for last 25-30 moves of the solve, all you can do is spam the RU moves, right? And if you sort of include the 600 or odd algorithms, that is not just RU algorithms, right? They also have the fat R in them, and that sort of takes away from the fact that it's going to be extremely fast to execute. So I'm not entirely sure that even if CP methods take off, if this would be one of the things that would, entice people to use. Maybe I'm wrong, but not really sure.
Yeah, and you could always throw in other move sets in there other than just wide R and R. Though it would break CP, since it's a one glass layer, it'll solve the cube in the end.
Exactly. So you could just use RUF and
Of course, that would
just
also be worse
do one
for...
look last layer.
It would be less optimal for one hand, though.
Yeah, I mean, I guess.
Yeah. What improvements do you see in the future of CP recognition? So, I mean, obviously we have the older... now we have Yruru recognition, which is better. And now, what do you think the future recognitions would look like, or how far we could push CP recognition and inspection?
I'm not sure if CP recognition could be much better than the way it is right now. Uh, maybe it's possible, but if at all, then it's only marginally possible. I think the more impressive things that people could do is figuring out ways to solve CP such that the rest of the cube is affected as less as possible. Because if you do that, once you solve CP, you don't have to put in a lot of effort in predicting what the next steps are going to be. And I believe that's where most of the development can be focused later on in the future for CP first methods.
Cool. Tim, do you want to ask our last question?
Yeah, you kind of just touched upon it, but what do you see as the future of CP first methods, and what improvements they could have?
So, I mean, of course, if you remove table abuse from the equation, then obviously CP first methods will definitely be one of the more important methods out there. If you don't remove table abuse, then I mean, Roux is going to be there, and I think it's going to be extremely difficult for any CP first method to convincingly beat Roux. For younger cubers who have the potential, the neurological coordination of being able to turn the cube extremely fast, consistently do OH algorithms at 10-12 turns per second. For those people, CP first methods are going to be extremely good. They're probably going to be much better for them, much more suited for them than Roux ever can be. But again, that is if you use CP first methods from an age where you can turn the cube extremely quickly. I'm not entirely sure if that's gonna be the case for most people though. So I don't unless there are extremely huge improvements in CP first methods and hardware to go along with these improvements, as in the outer layers of the 3x3 being larger than the inner layers of the 3x3, for example, being one of the modifications that can be made. And maybe even some rule changes that makes it difficult for Roux solvers, for example. For example, the removal of table abuse. In those cases, CP first methods can flourish, but otherwise, I don't see that happening.
I think that changing the geometry of the cube so that it's not all perfect squares, like the stickers aren't all even size. I don't know whether that's comp legal or not, but that would be interesting.
That's comp legal or not? I mean, I don't see a reason why that won't be comp legal, because at the end of the day, the cube is still going to be symmetric completely, and it's not
Right.
going to give you any edge in terms of recognizing anything.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's fair.
The only thing it's going to do is it's going to help you turn the outer layers much more easier without misaligning the inner layers. That's just what I feel.
Okay. All right. Cool. Thanks for coming on our podcast. This has been really great.
Right. Yeah, I had a lot of fun.
Oh, wait. Actually, we missed one question.
But I had a
Right,
question around algorithms again. Basically, do you think that you were mentioning that some algorithms were easier because they're two generator, perhaps, because they're only or something like
Yeah.
that. A lot of people find algorithms, I think, harder to memorize because you have just this long sequence of the same moves back and forth, RU, R prime, all that type of stuff. Do you feel that two algorithms are easier or harder, to memorize than three
In
generators?
terms of memorizing, I think 2-gen algorithms are fairly easy. But then again, I memorize 2-gen algorithms in a very different way. So I have this system of letters that I have assigned to all 2-gen triggers in my own native language, which has which has like two alphabets. It has one alphabet for vowels and one alphabet for consonants. So the moves in the middle I can assign vowels, and the triggers I can assign consonants, and I can come up with words, and that helps me memorize algorithms much easier. We tried to come up with such a system in English, but it turns out it's extremely difficult in English, simply because the language is not the way the words are structured in English is extremely complicated.
So you have
Yeah,
a
but I
you have a consonant for a trigger, and then the moves to set up to the next trigger have their own vowel or consonant.
Yeah, it's like if the algorithm is the sexy move RUR prime U prime, I'll have a consonant for RUR prime, and I'll have a vowel for U prime.
Oh, okay.
For example, D and A. So the word would be da, and you can just make it more complicated by having a longer algorithm. The thing is, of course, this is a tool to help you memorize the algorithms verbally. It does not help you use them efficiently in a solve. But what this does is, if you get stuck at some point within an algorithm, it helps you recover very quickly, and I believe this helps you learn the entire alg set much more conveniently. This is what I did with 2GL when I was learning it. I did the same thing with TSLE when I was trying to learn ZGCT, and it helped me a lot.
All right. Cool. I think that does conclude our podcast. It was great having you. This was really productive and hopefully helped the method community out.
Right, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening, guys. This was the second episode in our podcast, the Methodical Cubing Podcast, where we talk about methods and different things in the cubing community. We hope to bring more content like this in the future.